Hello, this is Uncle Sam from code2.org, and this is the third part and also the last part of the tutorial series about the Spline tool of Worldbuilder. Now, in the previous parts I've covered how to use texture splines and how to use object splines, even how to combine those two. And in this last part now I want to talk about deformation splines. I think a lot of people intuitively use the height editor to modify the terrain deformation. This is certainly the easiest or the most intuitive way at first, but not necessarily the most flexible way. Sometimes it's better to use deformation splines. For example, if I want to create a deformation below a hedgerow, and I want to move that hedgerow maybe, then it might be good to create that deformation with a deform spline, which is directly attached to the same spline that creates this hedgerow. Or sometimes the profile editor of a deform spline is just more precise than the height editor itself. So there are some uses for the deformation spline, and I'll go into details throughout this tutorial, but we'll start with the first part, general information, then I'll give some examples like rivers and ditches, and in the end I'll talk about ramps and stairs. So let's go into Worldbuilder and start with the general stuff. Okay, so once more we activate the Spline tool up here. This time we choose the deform mode in the top right here. Mark the check mark under default, and what you see here is the panel which lets you control such a spline. What we can do here is we set the height, and this height is with reference to the standard height of my map here. So say this is a flat ground and I give this one a height of 1, then it adds 1 meter on top of the height here, especially when I use the additive mode here. There are some presets like hedgerow, which is 1, or flat, which is 0, but I can basically enter any value here that I want. Say I pick 2 right now. So with this I can now place the spline as usual, and what you see is nothing happens. The height is only applied once you hit this button, set to default height, which is this value. So I click this, and what you see now is I've got some deformation applied to the spline. Now I can modify this spline just as usual as any other spline. The deformation will move with it. I can rotate it, I can change its width, whatever I want. So it's flexible in this sense, but what you see here right now is okay, the corners are a bit they are not smooth, and it's maybe not very useful in the state it is right now. So maybe even I reduce the height right now a bit to 1 to make the highlight of these non-smooth corners or edges. What I can do here is use the edit profile. If I open this, a new tab appears, and this basically gives me the height profile if you put a cut into the spline under 90 degrees. So right now, by default, this editor has 2 corners, this one, both set to 1, and this is the scale with respect to the height value you put in here. So now should I, by left clicking in here, create a third point, this will now, and when I apply the same profile to my spline over here. So if I look here, it's now this V-shaped spline. Maybe I'll illustrate it by making the spline a bit more straight, and maybe even increase the height a bit just to make it more pronounced. So set, and now we just look through this here. So you see here, this is now the profile which I have entered in the edit profile. Now maybe this V shape is not very useful, but what we can do is we can use this to soften the edges. Okay, now I already saw here it's been zoomed a bit. You can use the mouse wheel to zoom. But what I want to do now here is basically I create a smooth edge. So I keep the center at maximum scale 1, and at the corners or at the edges I put the scale to 0. So this creates a smooth form of my spline. Apply, look here, and this already looks much smoother than it was before. Maybe I should add the corners now again. So it's still not perfect, but it's certainly better than it was before. I can even make the edge smoother, add another one here, add another one here, whatever I want. And by this edit the profile of my spline. Should I, for whatever reason, want to remove one of these nodes here, I can just right click on them, just like I would do with the colorize tool. So this gives me a way to edit the profile of a spline. And I can do this very precisely. Here on the left and the value, you can see exactly the point on the x-axis, so I can make this super symmetrical. Let's say 25% from the left, 25% from the right, and do all this very precisely. So how can I use this for something useful actually? For example, I can use this now to create some height profile below a hedgerow. So I take this, the hedgerow profile was 1, so I set to default. This is now some height profile, and like I've done in the previous tutorial, I can now combine different types of splines. So maybe I go to the texture spline, I make this make a check mark here. I go to some texture which is good for a hedgerow. Say this one, for example. I pick it, I add it. So this is now added to on top of my deformation. I may even scale it or colorize it slightly by giving it a bit more opacity or a bit less opacity, so the transparency is increased. Apply, so it blends a bit better, whatever I want here. Then I want to add an object, so I go to the object mode of the spline. I already put down here some hatches, which I've have chosen before, but I can still do this. I have to apply them to the current spline, so I've got to do this again. Maybe go to, where are these hedgerows? Say wild hatch. Oh, how do I actually do this? Oh, right. I have to pick this defaults, and of course up here I now have to add the objects mode to my spline. So right now I've added the default list of objects to my selected spline, and now it appears here in the current list. So this still doesn't look very good because I've got these spaces here, but in the previous tutorial we learned how to fix this by reducing the spacing gap. Apply this, and suddenly it all becomes a combination of all 3 spline modes. And we've got a texture below the hedgerow, we've got some deformation which puts it on some small hill which might represent some rubble below it, whatever. So this is the first thing you can think of when applying some deformation spline. Now these are the basics. If we go back to the overview, another thing which deformation splines might be useful for are rivers or ditches. So instead of creating some elevation, I will now reduce the terrain or the terrain height to create a ditch or a river. Now, with all the flexibility to do this, we take a new spline. I just check the deformation spline now, Now in this case I want to reduce the height, so I give it a negative value here, say 2 meters deep river. I place this and I set to default height. Now you already know that how to fix this non-smooth edge over here, so we go to the edit profile, we again create a smooth edge. Now don't make the mistake to reduce this in order to say, put down this this value because I want to reduce the terrain. I've picked already a negative value, so I still just have to scale the edges with the value here in the profile. So with this I create a smooth riverbed. Just for demonstration reasons I can also indeed make it this way. I just have to, in this case, change this to a positive value. So actually doesn't want to work, so ignore my comment, go back to what I said earlier, scale the edges smoothly like I did before, like this, set to negative value, and that's it. So now this might be a pretty thin river. I increase the width a bit. I may even put some water in there so you can see how the river would look like in the end. Give it a bit lower offset, say 9.5, enter. So, but going back to the spline tool, you might think, okay, this is not the most naturally looking river. It's got the same width. Okay, let me just update. Same width over its whole length. So this doesn't look very natural or very very true. What we can do now is apply the width transformation on a node basis, like we already did when we applied some texture for a cliff edge. So in order to do this, I hit the space bar to activate my nodes. I may even create some more nodes by putting this all the way back and add to front, so I've got more controls. Separate them, and now say here in the corner I want to have the river a bit wider, so I select this node, hold down shift, and with the right mouse button I increase the width over here. Now say I want to make it thinner here, I decrease it, make it thicker again. You get the trick, you can do it all the way you want. So now hit space to unselect the nodes. Maybe the water is distracting actually, because I always have to update it. But anyway, now you see this looks maybe a bit more natural because the width of the river is not uniform. It has some variation, and the advantage of this now is when I really disable this water, I get rid of it, is that if I say want this river to go somewhat, well, I've noticed I need this more space here and the river has to change its way, I can just simply move the river and put it wherever I want, or move it. So this has some more flexibility than just doing it by the deformation tool. If I would use the deformation tool with a negative value, some intermediate strength, I could of course also move the river here, or place the river here. This is the wrong thing. But now if this river is positioned here, how do I move it to this location? The only way I have is to get rid of the river here completely and create it again at the new position. So this is not very intuitive, or not very fast. In this case, a river spline might be the better option. So now you know how to create rivers using splines. The last step I want to cover is how to use splines for ramps. So we go back to Worldbuilder again, and I've already prepared some area here. So this is the kind of ramp I want to create. Now, also here, many of you might think, okay, let's just take the height tool, the height editor, give it some intermediate strength, and just say smooth the edge here, and yeah, that's fine. Put the spline over here, and that's it. But it's not very precise. Let me just do it again. If we now zoom in, you see that you've got some strange angles here. It's somewhat going inwards, also outwards. Maybe I don't want this to go outwards, but I want this to be right at the edge over here. So how to do this? With a spline tool, I can do this. I undo my change, and now we just want to reproduce this. So what we have to know is I can check the height here, 11.5. I can check the height here, 10. So we have a height here of 1.5 meters more than the ground. So going back to the spline tool now, I create a deformation spline with, okay, I activate it here, with a height of 1.5 meters. So 1.5 meters, position it, oops, I need 4, enter, set to default height. Now I rotate it to be aligned along the grid. I can now maybe activate the overlay of the grid and look down from the top and say, by this define my orientation even a bit more precisely, and now say I want to have a gap or a stairway or a ramp of a width of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, say 7 meters. So I edit the length, start at, say here, move these closer together. Now it's really important to have them on a line, and put the endpoint exactly at 7 meters. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and one more. This may be a bit tricky. Let me move to see it better. Like this. So, disabling the overlay, I now have a spline deformation which is precisely 7 meters wide. Oops. And has a width of 5. Now I can change the width just like I could for texture by going here, say I want to have the stairway 10 meters long, go set to preset width. This now puts my width here, but I want it to be 5, so I undo this. And now the trick is to give it a profile of a ramp. So I go to edit profile, put one side down, keep the other side up, hit apply. Okay, this was the wrong direction, so I redo it. Apply. And what I have now is a 7 meter wide ramp. And not only do I have a ramp, I have got a ramp which I can move easily to any position that I want. So I can move the ramp from this position, put it down here, maybe even here, wherever I want. But we want to put this exactly at this position over here. And now I can just do the same thing as I've done here. Create a copy of this spline by holding down C and dragging. Activate the grid again, put this spline precisely here to 7 meter grid. And now I could also position these walls to the sides, which are indeed objects. So I copy them, I select them, hold down C, create a copy, move it. Now you see the height is adjusted. I have to fix this first by put the object placement to adjustable and not relative to terrain. So now I can, it doesn't change the height anymore. Put this down here. Actually might have to increase this in height a bit by holding down the H key. Put this down. Anyway, I don't have to make this very precise, it's just for demonstration, so it's all good. So maybe it's even too high, whatever. So put this down and say now the ramp is too long for my spline, so for my side walls. I can still just update the width to be a bit shorter, move it in like this. And now it might be better, and yeah, we're fine, I guess. Now one little thing I want to mention here is that right now only the additive mode is functional. It seems like there is a bug which doesn't allow me to use the min-maxitive mode. And what is the min-maxitive mode? I would have to use it if I wanted to make this ramp inwards, because in this case the spline should apply a deformation only if the height of my spline is lower than the height of this upper plateau. Say right now with the additive mode it's just adding on top, so I put it here and you'll see that it's getting added. Maybe it's even more clear when I apply it sideways, make it a bit longer just so you see it. I will also remove the profile. Like I said, it's just for demonstration right here now. So what you see here now is that at this step the two heights are added. Here it's +1.5 and here it's +1.5. Now usually I pick the min-maxitive mode and apply it, and now this would be one level. It would pick the lowest level, or the only a level, or it will only apply the deformation if the height was smaller than the plateau height. But for some reason it doesn't work right now. Hopefully it gets fixed, and in this case you could move the stairways even inwards. Anyway, I've talked enough. Let's come to a short conclusion. First of all, I've hopefully convinced you that the deformation spline is useful for some deformations and is more versatile than the height editor in some places, because you can just move the spline, you can directly attach it to other splines. Yeah, and it is sometimes more precise, like for stairways. So with this, the whole series is come to an end, and if there are still remaining questions regarding splines, please feel free to ask them in the tutorial thread on kotu.org. I will link the thread in the description of the video, and yeah, I hope it helped you a bit and will result in some awesome maps. Thank you.